You might remember playing loads of video games when you were younger. I was certainly the same. I played a lot of Animal Crossing Wild Worlds, but then everything else was just card games. Card game, card game, card game, card game. I played games such as Gran Turismo, Gran Turismo 2, Gran Turismo 4. I played Ridge Racers, I played original crew game. I played a lot of games up until my late teens. Until recently, where I haven't really been playing any video games. I just feel I'm a bit old to be playing video games like I did, and I'm not really into the sim racing stuff as I used to be anymore. However, we decided to take one last look back at all the video games, and we're going to put them into a tier list. Here's our tier list. Thank you to our editor for editing all this, because there's just not going to be a tier list here. So let's get straight into this video. Now, you might notice at some point in this video we use this user interface. Might be wondering what that user interface is. Well, that is RetroArch. Now, this is not a sponsorship, this is not a partnership, this is nothing to do with RetroArch at all. However, this video would not have been possible without RetroArch in the slightest. I'd like to thank RetroArch for this video to be possible, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to make this video, and this video was very cool to make. So if you want to emulate games from the past, you want to go play Need for Speed Carbon, you want to go play Need for Speed Most Wanted, hey, if you want to play it for the DS, you can go play it. All you have to do is go online, download some ROMs, and check that they're okay with a certain emulator that you're using. But RetroArch is the one we used for this video because it was the easiest to use, it's the easiest to understand for my old ass. I'm 18 years old now, and it's getting really hard to understand this new technology. So I want to thank you so much for RetroArch to be part of this video, because it was so easy to make this video with their technology. Gran Turismo. I have a lot of fond memories here, and I'm guessing you do as well. So let's get straight into it. We first had a little play with the menus before going straight into a race. There's 3 options here: time attack, drift, and of course race. After picking a race, we had to pick our car, for which I played around with the menus for a bit and chose the Mitsubishi, which brings us on to our third and final option, which is track selection. They have quite a few tracks in this game, and I was honestly astonished to see that for such an old game. We eventually went with Fuji Speedway, and here is where the nostalgia flooded straight back in. We hit that famous countdown, and then we took off. After the first 2 corners, we had a wild fight for first place, eventually being victorious. Also having an epic fight on the straight. Really was neck and neck to the last minute. Eventually coming first and showing us the finish board. Now, despite having to relearn the controls completely, we eventually did get used to them. It took me about 40 minutes, and I really enjoyed my time playing this game. It was really a throwback. There was some great fights, and honestly, the cars feel very good for a game that came out quite a few years ago. Almost handling like a sim. For how old this is, that is actually quite impressive. I was pretty shocked to see how this game handles. You can really tell they put the effort into this one. Based off of nostalgia alone, this is definitely an S tier game. Moving on to our next game, we are going to play Ridge Racers. Ridge Racers is a weird one for me, as I don't really actually have many memories of this game. However, it was the first game I ever played on console. Having come from the Nintendo DS, it was a real change for me. At first, at a friend's house. As far as the menu went, it went pretty well. It was quite in-depth, with quite a good track selection and quite a good car selection. Nothing to really write home about though. I didn't show all the cars, however these are the class 1s, and I think they showed a few of the class 2s as well.
For an arcade game, this actually didn't feel too bad, although it did feel very unrealistic when you drifted. As you can see here, it didn't really look that great. The driving and the music is just amazing, however we can't really show you much of it because it is just pure copyright, and to be honest, I don't know if I have the cut rights to this. I am going to give this a B tier rating, as it isn't actually as bad as I remember it being. Overall, being a decent game. Now, before we get into this game, I would just like to add that this game may look a bit odd. You might think this isn't Need for Speed Most Wanted, and you're right, it isn't. Normal Need for Speed is made by Black Box and EA. However, this is made by a studio called Sensory Sweep Studio. They worked on various games like Taika Wood's PGA World Tour 2005 and Street Fighter 2. I wanted to highlight this very obscure version of Need for Speed Most Wanted because this is the one I have most memories with. Now, as I stated before, this game isn't necessarily bad, it just doesn't handle great, and yeah, but we are rating Need for Speed Most Wanted as a whole, and in fact Need for Speed as a whole, so this doesn't really matter at all. We start with naming ourselves, and we see our first car, the Chevy Cobalt SS. Now admittedly, the graphics on the DS version don't look the best, and it is a shame that they don't, because this game is actually pretty cool, even though it is a very limited version of Need for Speed. As we say, this version is made by Sensory Sweep Studios. My fondest memories of this game are going out of the map, where there is a little glitch. I didn't get it in this video, but it is out there somewhere. So we dove into our first and only race I could really figure out, and I managed to go backwards. We learned there's a lot of bugs with this one. For example, the speeder doesn't work in reverse, and the traffic is like the Great Wall of China. After a while, I kind of did get the hang of it, luckily, but the driving was still very odd. The steering was just not there at all, and whenever you steered too much, and then you ended up in a barrier. Almost as if the car wanted to power slide, but it didn't go into the power slide. This version was very odd to showcase, as I didn't really understand what was going on. I knew we were in a street race, but that was about it. After a very painful 3 laps, we have to give this franchise an A. Even though the racing was horrible in Need for Speed Most Wanted DS, it was still better than a lot of games. And this franchise has a really special place in my heart. I make a mess of the controls at the end, slowing down to 0 miles per hour and then hitting the wall, managing to finish. Our next game is the Sega Rally series, and despite never owning this, I have actually played a few hours of this game, whether it be on arcades or at people's houses. Now I have to admit, the menus were very slow and finicky, however that could be down to the emulator. Now there is a few different game modes. There is Quick Race, Championship, and others, however I decided to go for this one. With a good selection of maps, I was actually quite surprised for how old this game is. I chose the map Arctic 3 and then chose the Skoda. Surprisingly, quite a few car options and 3 tyre options. We went for automatic as I didn't actually have any way of using manual, and we booted up our first race. Now despite my terrible driving, I actually loved how this game felt and how this game looked. It was very retro and I really enjoyed playing this one. Despite being absolutely horrible at it, I actually felt this was a great game. The only thing that annoyed me was when I was turning, I kept pressing the wrong buttons, and I kept looking back because the buttons are quite close together. Again, nothing to do with the actual game, just the emulator. Also partially because of what I'm recording on. We eventually come up to one of the other Skodas, and I have a massive skill issue. And then, because I'm no good at this game, I hit him a bunch of times until I get past, basically pushing him out the way. Now, if I did have to say anything, the maps were rather short, and I found that a bit sad, but for a game this old and this size, can you really blame them? And at the time, the graphics were really good for its age, and they couldn't really do much else with the game. few laps later, we eventually come across the finish line, and honestly, I love this game. I've kind of fell in love with it, even if I did horribly throughout the entire game. Models of the cars are absolutely amazing, and so is the maps themselves. We come across the line in 4th, which isn't bad considering how many crashes I had. I also love this menu design. This game actually has really cool features for the replay. All of the different cameras were very interesting to play around with, and so was the actual dynamic of it. The lighting is actually pretty good for what it is, and I found the maps very detailed. Once again, I feel this is kind of an A-tier game, however, it was really good to play. So, to round this off, we were going to play Midnight Club 3. However, despite a few hours of playing around with RetroArch, it wouldn't work. So we wanted to thank RetroArch for making this video possible. RetroArch put up with a lot of stuff, and that is surprising. A lot of emulators would have got stuck or wouldn't have loaded games. However, the only issue I had was with Midnight Club. However, we are going to do a part 2, which means we will get Midnight Club working, and if you have any suggestions, we will play them in the next one. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we'll see you all later. Goodbye.